All right, so you're getting ready for a business value or interview. We've got some RoleCatcher resources here to help you knock it out of the park.
That's right. We're going to look at some of the most common questions they ask and what those tricky follow-up questions might be, and sprinkle in some career insights to give you an edge.
Perfect. Let's jump right in with a question you're almost guaranteed to hear. Tell me about your experience in business valuation. You might be thinking, what if I haven't done exactly that?
Yeah, that's when you get a little creative and you think about any time that you have applied any of those principles, even if it wasn't strictly business. Maybe you've analyzed stocks for your own portfolio or helped a friend value their side hustle.
Ooh, I love that. Initiative. You're already thinking like a valuer. Here's a likely follow-up. What are the different valuation methods and how do you choose the right one? This is where you show off your knowledge.
Exactly. You want to show you really understand the income approach, the market approach, and the asset-based approach, but don't just list them out. Let's say the interviewer says, I'm valuing a tech startup that has huge growth potential. Which method would you lean towards and why?
Okay, yeah, that's a great example. I think in that case, I'd probably lean toward the market approach. You could look at comparable companies and factor in the growth potential. If it was a more established business with pretty stable cash flows, then maybe the income approach would be more suitable. Really depends on the situation.
Exactly. You got to be able to adapt.
Yeah.
Let's talk about challenges. Interviewers love to hear about a time you faced an obstacle and how you overcame it. So think about a time when maybe you didn't have enough information or you had to figure out how to value something intangible like brand reputation.
Oh, yeah, intangible assets, it can be
Yeah.
really tricky. I remember one project where we had to try and come up with a value for strong customer relationships. We ended up using a combination of market research and financial modeling to get to a reasonable number.
There you go. It's all about solving the problem, and they want to see that you can do that, not just crunch numbers.
Absolutely. Now let's shift gears a little bit, talk about staying current in the field. Things change all the time in business valuations, so how do you stay up to date on new trends and regulations?
Here's your chance to show your passion for the field. Are there specific publications or organizations you follow, like maybe the American Society of Appraisers or the National Association of Certified Valuators and Analysts? Have you noticed any recent trends, like how much people are using data analytics now?
That's a good one. I did want to mention RoleCatcher's AI. It can be a game changer for interview prep. You can upload a job description, and their AI will analyze it to help you tailor your answers to that specific role.
It's like a personalized cheat sheet for every interview. Helps you figure out exactly what skills and experience they're looking for so you can emphasize your strengths.
Exactly. And they've even got an interview practice tool so you can answer common questions and get AI-powered feedback on your responses.
That's a great way to practice and get comfortable talking about your skills. Okay, going back to those interview questions. What do you do when they ask you to walk them through a real-life valuation project?
Yeah, you don't want to get lost in all the jargon. Pick a project that fits the job and focus on the key steps. What challenges you faced and what was the outcome. Even if it wasn't a raging success, you can talk about what you learned.
Every experience is a learning experience right here. Now, here's one that focuses on communication. Imagine you have to explain a complex valuation to someone who doesn't know anything about finance. How would you do it?
Oh, that's a good one. That's a real test. I think I would try to use analogies and visuals instead of talking about discounted cash flow. Maybe compare it to how much a house is worth based on the rent it can bring in.
I like that. Make it relatable. Okay, let's talk about building trust and credibility. How do you make sure your valuations are accurate and reliable?
Well, that's where your quality control processes come into play. You can mention peer reviews or double-checking your data or making sure you're following industry standards. It shows that you are thorough and care about producing quality work.
And integrity. It's super important in this field.
Oh, before I forget, I wanted to point out another great RoleCatcher resource. They have a database of over 9 million employers.
Oh, wow.
You can research companies, connect with people, and even get discovered by employers who are looking for your skills.
Talk about a secret weapon for your job search.
Okay, one last question before we move on to the next part. How do you handle conflicts of interest that come up?
This is where you show your ethical side. Think about how you would handle those situations and what guidelines you follow, like the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, USPAP for short.
It's all about showing that you're objective and will prioritize integrity even when it's tough.
And upholding those professional standards.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground. Experienced different valuation methods, challenges, communication, staying current, and even ethics. But there's still more to come in the next part. We're going to dig into some of those really technical questions that they like to throw at you in an interview.
You got it. We'll see you there. Okay, so let's keep going with this. Now we're going to get into some of the more technical questions that you might get in a business valuer interview.
Yeah, these are the ones that really make you prove you understand those valuation methods.
Right, here's one. Walk me through a discounted cash flow analysis. This is where you show off how you analyze things.
It's more than just knowing a formula, right?
Yeah.
You have to understand it and be able to explain it step by step in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. So start by explaining what a discounted cash flow analysis is, or DCF, and why it's used. Then take them through the steps, like projecting future cash flows and working at the discount rate and then calculating the present value.
Oh, and don't forget the terminal value. That's the value of the business after the forecast period.
No. Right. They might even ask you how you'd come up with the discount rate. That's super important because it reflects the risk.
You'll need to know how to explain all the parts of it, like the risk-free rate, the return you'd get from a risk-free investment like a government bond.
And the market risk premium, that's the extra return investors want because they're taking on more risk.
And then there are the company-specific risk factors that are unique to the business, like competition industry, changes the company's finances, things like that.
Okay, let's switch gears a little. Another question they like to ask is, what are some common multiples used in the market approach? This is where you show that you know about comparable company analysis.
So you'll want to be familiar with things like price to earnings, or PE, price to sales, or PS and enterprise value to EBITDA.
Yeah, you'll want to explain what each one means, how you calculate it, and when you'd use it. So for example, the PE ratio might be a good one to use for a company with stable earnings, but for a company with high growth but maybe low earnings or even losses, you might use the PS ratio instead.
Right, you pick the right tool for the job. Remember when we talked about those intangible assets? Well, the interviewer might ask you to explain how you would go about valuing a specific one, like a patent or a brand name.
That's a chance to get creative and show them how you solve problems. There are different methods you can use for this, like the cost approach or the market approach or the income approach.
You could maybe use the cost approach for a patent by figuring out how much it would cost to develop a similar one today, or look at what people have paid for similar brands if you're using the market approach to value a brand.
And if that intangible asset makes money, you could use the income approach and look at how much it could potentially earn.
Okay, let's talk about something else that's really important.
Hmm.
Due diligence. They could ask you to describe what your process is.
Here's where you can show that you're thorough and pay attention to detail. Tell them what you'd focus on, like their finances, what's happening in the industry, who their competitors are, and the management team.
Oh, and you could mention specific tools you'd use, like how you analyze financial statements or your industry research or interviews with key people at the company.
Right. You want to show that you have a system and that you're going to be very thorough to understand the business. Now, don't forget that RoleCatcher has those AI-powered tools that can be super helpful when you're preparing for these technical questions.
Totally. Their practice feature lets you go through the tough questions and get AI feedback.
It's like having a mock interview with an expert.
Okay, back to the questions. Here's one that tests how well you understand adjustments. What are some adjustments you might make to a company's financials during evaluation?
This shows that you get accounting and that you know how to make adjustments to normalize the earnings and assets.
Some common adjustments include adding back non-recurring expenses, adjusting for owner compensation, and accounting for any excess assets or liabilities.
The goal is to end up with financials that show the company's real operating performance and financial position.
Now, towards the end of the interview, they almost always ask, what are your salary expectations? It can be a tough one, but it's best to be ready for it.
Yeah, do your homework. Look at the average salaries for business valuers in your area and think about your experience, your skills, and what they're asking for in the job. You have to know your worth, but be realistic too.
Don't be scared to negotiate either. You have a lot to offer.
And speaking of things that are valuable, check out RoleCatcher's career guides. They have insights into different career paths, including business valuation, that can really help you figure out what skills you need, what education you need, and what certifications can help you move ahead in your career.
Good tip. So we've talked about a lot in this section: discounted cash flow analysis, due diligence, valuation adjustments, salary expectations. And we talked about how RoleCatcher's AI and career guides can help you prepare and feel more confident going into your interview.
But remember, business valuation is not just about technical stuff. It's about being able to communicate, think critically, and solve problems. So in the next section, we'll look at some of those behavioral questions that try to get at those softer skills.
Yeah, those are the questions that let the interviewer see what you're really like, how you work, and how you deal with difficult situations. All right, so we've covered all those technical questions, but now we got to get into the behavioral ones, the ones that try to figure out what kind of person you are and how you work.
Yeah, these are the questions about dealing with pressure, problem solving, how you work with others.
Okay, so let's start with a classic. Tell me about a time you faced a challenge at work and how you overcame it.
This is your chance to show them you can solve problems and that you're resilient. So think of a time you had a tough deadline or a complicated valuation, or maybe you disagreed with a colleague.
And it's not just about what the problem was, right? You have to tell them how you tackled it, the decisions you made, and what the result was.
And don't be afraid to talk about what you learned from it. Even if it didn't go perfectly, you can still say what you took away from the experience.
Here's another common one. Describe a time you had to work as part of a team to achieve a goal. Business valuation, a lot of it involves working with others, so they want to know that you can be a team player.
You got it. So pick an example that shows your teamwork skills, like being able to communicate well, delegate tasks, and handle any conflicts that come up.
And focus on the good stuff.
Yeah.
What did you contribute? How did you help the team succeed? What did you learn from the other people on the team?
Okay, now let's think about leadership. They might ask something like, describe your leadership style, or tell me about a time you had to lead a project.
Even if you haven't had like an official leadership role, you can still show that you have leadership qualities, like when you took initiative or mentored someone or influenced a group decision.
Right, you want to show that you can get people motivated and inspired, that you can set clear goals and delegate tasks effectively.
There are tons of different ways to be a leader, so just be yourself and tell them what works for you.
And speaking of being yourself, they might throw this one at you. What are your weaknesses?
Don't worry, it's not a trick question. It's actually a chance for you to show that you know yourself and that you're willing to grow. Pick a weakness that makes sense for the job, but also something you're working on to improve.
Yeah, maybe you could say something like, I sometimes get stuck in the details and lose sight of the bigger picture. But then explain what you're doing to learn how to stay focused on the overall goal.
It's all about being honest, but also showing them that you're proactive and always trying to learn and get better.
Before we finish up, I want to mention those AI-powered tools from RoleCatcher again, because they can really help you get ready for these behavioral questions too.
Absolutely. They have a whole library of behavioral questions in their practice feature. And their AI will give you feedback on your answers so you can really polish them and feel super confident.
Like having a coach right there with you.
So we've talked about a lot of questions, technical ones, behavioral ones. We looked at different valuation methods. We talked about challenges and solutions, and even touched on ethics and career stuff.
And we showed you how RoleCatcher's AI and career resources can really help you in your job search.
Acing a business valuer interview isn't just about knowing all the answers. It's about showing your enthusiasm, your analytical skills, being able to communicate clearly, and showing that you're committed to being ethical.
It's about telling your story and showing them why you're the best person for the job.
And with all the information and resources we've talked about today, you're in a great position to do just that.
So get out there, be confident, and good luck.
Well, that's all for this deep dive. We hope you found it useful and helpful. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep on diving deep.